Hey, if you're not aware, I have hundreds of new subscribers. I write books, and right now, please pray for me because I'm focused now again on trying to finish Genesis, especially during the slow music time. When things are slow down, I can focus. I've been so busy with the Learning Hub that I haven't been writing, and I want to get back to writing here. The Genesis is one of a kind. There's not going to be another commentary like Genesis that you're going to find. I'm sorry, like this one on Genesis that you're going to find. And the reason I know is because I've been looking for commentaries for years. I know what's out there. This is really unique because it's Christ-centered from the beginning to the end. It's Christ on every page. And it's full, based on the rich context we have about grace. That Christ is our righteousness. Christ is our sanctification. Christ is our reward. I think you'll really like it. But speaking of the Learning Hub, I decided I put up my devotional, and I did this 2 weeks ago, but I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I spent, whenever I do something like this, it's hours and hours and hours of work. But I converted the ebook into web pages so that you can browse it in a web reader. If you go to ChristiansNeedTheGospel.com/devotional, it takes you to the Learning Hub, and you can just pick a day. And that devotional is very unique. Some of you have heard Nicole's readings of those. But it's focused on identification, truth, and specifically how to pray it. Because if you're not praying the word, you're not engaging with it. The word is for your spirit. Jesus said, "My word is spirit and life. The flesh profits nothing." And to eat his blood and drink his flesh, or eat his flesh and drink his blood, is speaking of the meat of the word, which is the knowledge of Jesus Christ. As he imparts himself to you in his high priestly ministry, he's right there visiting you in the word when you turn it into prayer. Especially when the prayer is laser sharp focused on what you have in Christ and what he is in you, because the communication of your faith becomes effectual through the acknowledging of every good thing that's in you in Christ. And I've done a lot of videos on this in the past, but I probably need to do some more on preaching the gospel to yourself. It's the one exercise, one practice that I can recommend, and it's just our word for what Paul said: let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom. How do you get filled with the Spirit? Be filled with be not drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to yourselves in psalms and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. And when he talks about the building up of the body of Christ, he says that we would no longer be babes tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine, but speaking the truth to one another in love, may grow up in all things into him who is the head, out from whom the body, being fitted together and compacted together by means of the joints of the rich supply and the operation of the measure in each part, grows unto the edification of itself in love. And that's Ephesians 4. It's talking about how the body is built up to become the habitation of God. It's all through speaking. It's speaking the gospel, speaking the truth in love. Now, it's interesting that speaking the truth in love is contrary to winds of doctrine that toss you around. And winds of doctrine come for people who have an academic approach to the word and think they've learned something, yet they never engage their spirit with it, and they're unclean. If you're handling the word, Jesus said, if your eye is single, your whole body is full of light. But if the light is in you is darkness, great is the darkness indeed. The light is the word. The entrance of your word is light. But if you handle it in a dead way, and your eye is not single, which it means you're not actually focused on Christ when you're in the word, and your spirit is not engaged, then the light becomes darkness, and it's even greater. So it's really important to learn to edify yourself with the word and not just look for arguments in it or look for doctrines and read it in a dry and academic way. So preaching the gospel to myself, devotional is focused on that in particular. it's designed to bring you right into the experience of fellowshipping with Christ in the Word and being full of light, and not letting the light in you become darkness. So please check out that devotional online and consider getting the book. A print copy is really good, and it helps me. I work. We don't preach works, but and all the pastors call us lazy, but I guarantee I work harder than all of them. And it's not I, but the grace. I know it's the grace, but I rely on donations and people buying the books or becoming a subscriber to keep being able to do this. And when I'm not doing a message, it's because I've been working on the Learning Hub. It's not because I'm just like watching TV or something. I've been working 12 hours a day on that thing. Now, speaking of the Learning Hub, I've decided to take Eliezer off the table. I was going to have this cartoon character interface with people and chat with them about the content, or at least give them answers. But people are so fast. I thought really the problem is with the AI and how do I get it to respond right? Why is it responding so weird? But as I'm looking at the questions got weirder and weirder and weirder. The questions that people were asking it, because they're so fascinated with this character being able to answer them, that they're just off the rails themselves. And until I can really funnel the user experience so that people are engaging it in a practical way, it's not safe, because people are asking weirder and weirder questions, and I don't want to be liable for the content it generates to try to keep up with them. I think there's some people with drugs and mental issues and demonic oppression mixed that are trying to get answers, and they're obsessed with one or two things, and they sat there and asked that thing. Somebody asked, I think 60 times, rephrasing the same question, getting basically the same answer every time. And this costs money. So for me, when you're asking it a question and it responds, that's an API call that actually costs money. And yes, I released it as beta for free so I could see how people would try to engage with it and stuff and attract them to the system. Because when I do a Learning Hub video, nobody responds and nobody goes and checks it out. But if I say there's a cartoon character who will talk to you, all of a sudden everybody goes and sees it and wants to see it, or more people. But those people, there's something weird about a lot of it. I'll just say that. And I'm not tracking people's email addresses or anything like that, so I don't know who they are, but there's some weirdos out there. So I just took that off the table. But that's not the main functionality anyway. The main functionality of the site is all this content from my teachings. Every video is a teaching, and every video that it recommends has a full Roman numeral summary with all the scriptures, and then these question-answer pairs is kind of a new feature in the last week or two, that are questions rooted in the main theological points of the content, and answers that are pretty verbose. So at this point, if you ask a question, you're going to get like 5 results back based on from my teachings, and they look like video recommendations because you can click on the video and go to YouTube and watch it, but underneath each one there's this reading content that is priceless. There's so much content on this site you can't even believe it. 2,600 videos are recommendations with all this content associated with it, and more is coming, so that you can get an answer to any theological question you have that I've taught on, that's as good as anything I could email you. It's really a one-of-a-kind system. Now, there's some things that people have to understand. It's natural language search. It's not Google or a database. Somebody had asked, you should make it so I can type a verse and you'll get anything you taught on a verse. Well, when you do that to Google, you'll get answer, like if you type John 3:16, you'll get Bible Gateway and you'll get Blue Letter Bible. You'll get the Bible verse. And then you'll get hundreds of pages of content, most of which is irrelevant. And the content that appears highest and ranks the best and is deemed the answer to your search often won't be relevant at all, because it's people who paid money to game the system to get their ranks on top. That's why Google search has been failing for a while. People are realizing, people are tired of getting, you do a search and hundreds of pages come back and only a few of them are relevant, but the ones that are relevant are gamed so that it's basically paid advertisements. That's not what we want. So if I had a verse system up, when I do a message, it's an hour long, and I may mention 100 verses in the message. Which one is the most relevant to the teaching? So if you type Hebrews 12:3, you're going to get tons of videos back that may or may not be relevant to your question. What are you at? See, that doesn't, Hebrews 12:3, give me everything he taught about that, doesn't really make sense. You're not going to get something really relevant that way. But let's say John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Okay, a plain language search allows you to say, what does it mean that God loved the world? Or what is the world? And you will get my teachings that are very specific and laser focused. You'll get answers about what the world system is, who's the God of this world, how do Calvinists abuse the word world and limit it to the elect, very specific stuff. And what we want is for you to get the most relevant answer to your question in the first few results. And that is a huge challenge. But the way I ended up finally doing it was generating thousands of question and answer pairs. From each video, I had the system generate a whole bunch of questions based on the main theological points, so that when you ask a question, the database returns several questions that are like your question, semantically similar. The more specific you can be, the better it's going to send back results. Don't do keywords. Do a real question. What is the world system? Who is the God of this world? What does it mean that God loved the world? Those kind of questions, you'll get meaningful results. And each of the question and answer pairs that come back in response to your query are attached to another database that has video stuff in it, but also summaries, Roman numeral outlines, and those videos are directly related to what you're talking about, and the outlines and the question and answer pairs that are returned are directly related to what you're asking. And that's the power of natural language search, is that you can conversationally ask a question, and it's now able to analyze mathematically how your question relates to all the data and what is most meaningfully related to what you asked. And it's really good at it. So people just need to learn kind of what it's for and what it's not a search engine where you're looking for a specific video. It's a question answering system with video recommendations as part of the answer to your question. And no, it doesn't have a chat bot with a cartoon face right now, but that was a icing on the cake kind of thing. The underlying system is still an AI system in the back, intelligently parsing what you say and comparing it against all this math in the database. It's called vector search. It's very different than anything that used to exist. Although some companies have been doing this for quite a while. Now, some people aren't using this thing because they say, well, it's AI, And that's dumb, because when you do a YouTube search, you're using AI. When you use a Google search, you're using AI. It's machine learning. It's all. The only difference really that came out in the last year with ChatGPT was the ability to converse with a system that can retrieve in its search results language, not just links to stuff or items like that. It's still a search engine. An AI is essentially a neural search engine. Now, people are afraid of AI, and I used to do a whole bunch of videos about why that doesn't need to be the case. After using it for a year, I'll tell you that this idea that AI is suddenly going to take over the world is far-fetched at this point. Anybody who's actually tried to use this in production has realized that the limits, this stuff is really dumb. It seems to be really amazingly smart, and for some use cases it is, but the people that are in charge of the fear mongering are the big companies like OpenAI that have billions of dollars invested in it, and they want to shut out the competition. And so they raise enough fear by having all kinds of people, spokesmen come out and release all these videos and do all this stuff about how it's going to take over the world, this existential threat. And then before you know it, they're meeting with Congress. They finally got Congress's attention. And they're saying, oh, please regulate this technology. It's so dangerous, and we want to be safe, and we'll even cooperate with you to regulate us. Well, all that is big corporations getting involved with government to regulate so that they own the market and nobody else can enter. That's all that is they're trying to construct a regulatory firewall to keep open source and average Joe user from being able to develop these things, or their competition from being able to develop it. And that's how these big companies have worked for a long time. But unfortunately, Christians in particular, if they are not in the Spirit and they are not educated on grace, are basically like living in the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages were characterized by all this superstition and fear. Black cats, broken mirrors, ladders, and shadows, and all the stuff, right? That's unfortunately how Christians who are not very educated and also not in the Spirit and don't know grace, that's how they live, is by superstition and fear. And so they're addicted to that stuff. They're buying in the technology, and you actually try to do something useful. But I want to say that you don't have to fear these things taking over the world, because it's hard to get it to do anything. It can't think beyond its context length, and the average AI model has a context length of what's called tokens, 4,000 tokens, which is the equivalent about 5,000 characters, 6,000 characters of text. After that, it can't hold any more in its memory, and it forgets everything and starts over. So that's why you'll be talking about, if you chat with one of these things, it'll seem to hold the conversation together for a little bit, but then all of a sudden it'll start, like if you're talking about theology, you'll be able to hold it into a perspective and talk about a free grace theology for a little bit. Before you know it, it starts giving you Calvinist answers. And people used to think, is it lying to me? And you say, you just said this and that. And it'd say, no, I didn't. Oh my God, it lied to me. It's gaslighting me. Oh my gosh, sorry. No, it's forgotten. Halfway through 5 minutes into your conversation, it doesn't remember that you were talking to it. Every time you say something to an AI, it wakes up and answers whatever you've given it. It's all new. But the mechanisms around, like ChatGPT, they've threaded the conversation history so that in addition to what you say, it also feeds it, this is what you said last time, and this is what you said the time before that, this is what you said the time before that. So each time you talk to it, the thread is growing bigger and bigger because it's feeding the entire conversation back through along with what you say each time. And so it gets slower and slower because of the amount of processing power it takes to compute all this, because there's incredibly sophisticated math going on in order for it to generate probabilistically text that looks like a conversation with you. Well, now you're asking it for more and more resources every time you say something. OpenAI just released a new thing called Assistants, where you can use their back end to create an assistant. And what people were finding was that, they would have a 15-minute conversation with the AI, and it would cost them $60 because they were leaving the threads open. So every time they talked, it's fed the whole conversation history back through, so that you were spending all this money, because it costs money every time you make an API call. And they were making a fortune off this. You had to learn how to tell it, okay, cut off the back end of the conversation. Don't keep feeding the whole thing through. And of course, they didn't give us instructions for that. You had to figure it out. After you've spent your $60 and gone, what did I do wrong? Well, you were feeding conversation history through, and you didn't put a limit on how much was going through. But that's how it simulates conversations. This is not a practical or efficient technology. It's extremely expensive. It costs millions of dollars to do it right. Now it's getting better, and you can use it for really narrow use cases. Like in my case, I've got a version of an AI database that's allowing me to, generate stuff from my transcripts and then vectorize it and have it come up in search results and stuff like that. But that wasn't cheap to put together. And it's not cheap to sustain. So this is why companies aren't quickly adopting this. Everybody thought, it's going to put us all out of work in a year. We need to have a universal basic income because AI is just going to take over. And people who are saying all that aren't trying to use it. As I was trying to design this system, there are no off-the-shelf products you can buy to do this stuff. I had to build all the tools myself. And I didn't know anything about programming. I mean, I wasn't just building the app myself. I had to build the tools that made the app. I don't know how I did it. The Lord was with me. I tried to get developers involved, and every single one of them got confused. They didn't know what this thing was. And it works really well. But that's the other thing, is that the corporations don't have enough people that understand how to use AI yet and implement systems that work. Most systems you try to implement just don't work. There's too many things you have to do. And it's too unpredictable. So this idea that we're going to just we're going to replace all our secretaries with AIs that do it all, that is not within reach right now. You can't trust this stuff with sensitive corporate data and your money. I wouldn't trust it with my money. No way. I have an AI assistant that I built that handles some of my databases, and it can do little updates for me. But if it forgets the conversation halfway through, it can update a table and delete everything. And I've seen it do it, and I've lost everything as a result, because halfway through, it didn't know what we were talking about anymore. And I learned that early on with the coding, because I would have it give me code, and I didn't know anything about coding, so I didn't know how to detect, this thing doesn't remember what the app is that we're building. You eventually, intuitively, you start to get a sense, okay, it's lost context, we have to start again. And when you start again, you have to start the whole conversation again and say, okay, we're building a such and such and so, and we're building a function that does this, and we've got this much done. And you have to detect, it lost context. So at the beginning, none of my code was working. Nothing was working. And it's because I would ask it to do things, and it would give me code back, and I didn't know how to tell whether the code would work or not. And I certainly didn't know that how to tell if it didn't remember what we were talking about halfway through writing the function. It's like, they call it goldfish memory, and it's getting better, but it's still really difficult to manage. And at the corporate level, nobody knows how to do that stuff. And it's funny because the programmers are afraid of GPT because they think it's going to replace them. And one of the reasons I couldn't get any developers to help me is because when they found out it was an AI system, they didn't want anything to do with it because they're threatened by it. So they're not learning to use it. Which means that it's not, even though the technology is amazing and everything, there's not enough people who know how to put it into production. It's people like me who have a very specific use case and are really driven and obsessed with it and can't stop. We're the ones who are learning how to use this stuff right now and make something productive with it and know its limits and have the intuitive feel for, okay, that's not going to work, No, you can't do that, and here's why, and why is it messing up? And, most people just don't understand that stuff and don't have the time. And people who run companies don't have the time. So there was a lot of money and a bubble because everybody thought, oh, we're going to lay off everybody and just replace them with AI. No, you're not. You're not even close. There's no way, You can have a simple, like for my music business, I have a GPT answer my emails. And it has all my pricing. And so when I get an inquiry, it does a better job than I could. And I book more now because the GPT answers my email. And I tell it, you have wedding experience and sales experience and marketing experience, and here's your product and here's the user's email, and compose an answer from my pricing. And it's really good, and it acknowledges all their stuff and says, okay, you're having a wedding on this date at this time, and we'd love to provide our services. Here's links to what we do, and here's some samples, and here's pricing for this package and this package. You mentioned you're efficient, might need a mic. Here, we rent a mic for that. It does really good for little tasks like that. But I wouldn't want it to redesign my website or be in charge of all my marketing materials. It can answer an email, but each time it answers it, I have to give it all the information again. So this stuff is really limited. Don't let the hype scare you. Don't be scared of the technology. Be scared of stupid people trying to use it and make it in charge of something important. The worst thing that could happen is the government go, we're just going to replace everything with AI and make AI in charge of legal briefs and make AI in charge of the medicine, and it'll be a disaster. And they know that. The corporations know that, and that's why you're seeing it roll out so slowly. And it's not that useful. But at the same time, I say all that to tell you, don't be afraid of it. It really isn't much more than anything we've been doing on our computers forever. I ask Alexa all the time. I've been asking Alexa for years. What's the weather? How long does it take to get to such and such? What is this medication? This medication has this ingredient. What is that? And it's been able to answer me in plain language for years. And nobody's crapping their pants about it. Don't believe the hype. This is new. It's different, but it's not. It's after using it for a year in intense trying to make something work with it, I can tell you, it's not as amazing as what I thought. But the products you can build with it are one of a kind and amazing if you keep pressing through. And this video recommendation, question and answer learning hub is amazing. Not because of the AI behind it, but because of the content itself and this unique theological perspective. I finally have a way for people to learn stuff without me having to do another video to explain it or write a whole, So please check it out. Please check it out, because I've spent too many thousands of dollars and too many thousands of hours on this. Just go to ChristiansNeedTheGospel.com and go to the Learning Hub. And also go to books and check out my books, please. I've got some really good short ones, like Messages of Grace on Discipline, that diffuse all the scary verses that pastors have abused you with. And holiness comes from assurance and not the other way around. You know, peace with God is how we have holiness, but most people think that the way we have peace is to be holy. No, it's the other way around. Holiness comes from peace. Christ is satisfaction, the reality of sanctification. I'm just thinking of my short books that you should check out. But there's the bigger ones like Romans. Christ is my righteousness in heaven. Christ is my life on earth. It's a deep dive into Romans 1 through 8, and it's like 500 pages. These are good things to give to people too. There's a sister who bought. Well, we gave her some because she was buying them, and I know she didn't have a lot of money, and giving them out to people. She gets into these conversations. They're great evangelical materials to give to people. And I'm writing one now called Let It Burn, that's about coming out of the institutional church and also all the dead works in religion that are going to be at the great bonfire in the day of Christ, the wood, hay, and stubble. And again, please pray for me because I'm really focused on writing my Genesis now, and it really is a one-of-a-kind kind of book. And I'm not boasting here by saying it's one of a kind. If you know my teaching, you know it's unique. It's not my teaching, it's Paul. The Lord is doing something very unique. Some people believe that, some people don't. I'm speaking to the people who do believe. And they've heard something unique here, and you're like devouring the content. And I'm telling you, there's a way that you can ask a question. If you're looking for videos to watch, and you want actual information about what the videos are about and full outlines and more information, the Learning Hub is your thing. And then there's all these books that things have slowed down quite a bit because I've not written a book in a few months and people aren't aware that I'm writing books. I've got 15 of them. Genesis is next and Let It Burn. But please consider how you can support because I'm now entering the slow time musically for the next 3 months. There will be nothing. So everything is really, I always am grateful. This thing really runs on generous people, buying books and supporting it. And sometimes I have to make a call. I don't like to merchandise, but sometimes I do have to say, look, it's time to think about it. It's, if you're looking for something to read or, you know, something to support, there's a way to support here. All right. Well, take care. Have a good Saturday. I'm going to try to do a teaching on Romans probably tomorrow.